Hello and welcome everyone. So in this video I had already started by cutting the meat, and I placed it on my sufuria, on my pot, and then I let it drain by itself, but before that I had washed it, so I placed it on the sufuria. And this is a few minutes later. After I had placed it, I placed it and I put a little bit of salt. Sorry about that part, I did not put it. But then after putting the meat, dry meat, in the pot, it will produce its own water, and you let it cook using its own water. So that's why I'm using the lid, so that the ones on the top, they can get cooked, and the ones on the bottom can get cooked too. Here I added a little bit of salad, so that it can cook, because it had already dried, the water had already dried. And the reason for doing this is because I believe that when you let it cook with its own water, it will be softer than when you boil it using water. And maybe that's if you want to put it for longer in the fire. But for me, I wanted to make it fast, and because it was for dinner and I didn't have a lot of time, and it also cooked well. So I believe by it cooking by itself, it will be a bit softer. And then I added a little bit of beef masala. So immediately after the oil, some beef masala, and now the onions. And as I stir it, I just let it cook for about a minute or two, and then I stir it. And as you continue, I put other ingredients. So I let it simmer for like a minute while I prepare the other ingredient. So here the onions were being cooked. You can see it's being cooked. After a minute, I put in the garlic and I stir it. Let it simmer for about a minute or two. Then I add my next ingredient, the green bell pepper. All this that I'm doing is because I want them to cook. And then I added my tomatoes almost immediately, and I let it simmer for a while. The reason for stirring is because we want all the ingredients to get to all the parts of the meat, and well, it can infuse its taste inside or incorporate. So that's the reason for stirring a lot of times. And then you close the lid and let it simmer for about 5 minutes or so, so that the meat, the tomato can, as you see here, the tomatoes have already gone down. And I'm adding my soy sauce, my dark soy sauce from Zesta, and I let it simmer again. As I stir it, I added my salt, because the first one that I added was not much. Even this one, I just added like a pinch of it, and that's why I love using that container bit, because I cannot exceed the needed amount, because I will just shake it to the required amount. So here all the ingredients were already incorporated and they had already simmered down. So I had to add a little bit of water, like a glass of water, so that I can make a little bit of soup from the meat, because I had not boiled it, so it had no broth. I had to just like make my own broth using a little bit of water, not much, and then you let it simmer down as you add your Royco cube, so that all these things are to add flavor and taste. Here I added a bit of Royco cube. In the last step, I had to add my green coriander, because it best produces the smell when it's cooked last. So a little bit of stirring, and I put it down to simmer. Here I had to change to the smaller cooker so that I can use the other cooker for making my greens. That is sukuma mixed with spinach. Here I was putting a little bit of salad. And I added my red onion. This was one red onion. So as it was cooking, I was looking at how the soup came out, and I really loved it. All the tastes were incorporated, but I felt it was a bit too salty, so I came in with a little bit of more water, and then I let it simmer. So my red onions were being cooked, and I was adding a little bit of water in my broth, my soup. This was how the soup was moving on. This was my beef stew, and this is how it was boiling down. So here my meat was already done, and I had to remove it from the cooker and continue with making my green vegetables. But then I had to start up with using the large cooker. I needed to start with my water, boiling water, for making my ugali. So from here, after I put the ugali water on the fire, I continued with cooking my onions, and they were already brown enough for me to continue putting the collard greens on my onions. They were already cooked enough, so I went in with my collard greens. So one thing about collard greens, we only cook using onions and just a bit of salt and powdered seasoning. We don't add more of those ingredients, all the other ingredients. We just go in with a few ingredients because that is the way we do it, and because we want to maintain the nutrient level of the collard greens. We want all the fibers, all the vitamins, so we cannot exceed 3 minutes of cooking the collard greens, and that's why we use minimal seasoning, minimal ingredients to cook the collard greens, because we don't want it to overcook. Another thing about collard greens, we don't use the lid to close the sufuria, because when you use the lid to close the sufuria, it will overcook using the steam. So we just leave it open like that. We don't add water, you don't add anything, we just let it simmer down with its own properties, and with a little bit of heat. You cannot interfere with the vitamins, you cannot interfere with the fibers, you cannot interfere with everything that it consists, so it will retain its strength. And that's how we need it. We need it to be green, not to turn to brown. Here the water was now ready for cooking, because we needed it to boil, and now it had come to a boiling point. Recently, I've seen videos of people trying to make ugali from other countries, and they're really trying, but we don't use cornstarch to make our ugali. We only use maize flour. You just take maize and you dry it in the sun. After drying it, and then you take it to the maize to the posho mill, and then they will just do a flour for you, and you come and make your ugali. We don't use cornstarch, we don't use oat, all these things that they use. Us here in East Africa, in Kenya, we use maize flour. I see in other countries they use cassava flour or sorghum flour or other things, but here in Kenya we do maize flour. So this is how you make it. I've done a detailed video on this, and this is one way of making ugali, the simplest way to make ugali. This is the last step before serving it on the plate. And you just let it simmer for like a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, until it produces that nice smell. So here I had already served my food, and these are the results. Wow, they're so yummy. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.